Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and I hope that if you have any questions you'd like to ask, you'll ask them, and we'll start with this thing. And it's kind of interesting because I believe that sound travels the same way, no matter whether you're singing or whether you're playing an instrument or playing a violin or any other thing. So we're going to get started with some of this stuff, and maybe it will change your concept of what you're doing, although it won't change actually where you want to be. So, but sometimes a concept can change a whole mental attitude that opens up new avenues for a person to become better at what he's doing. Now, when you tell a person that you can't, when you sing louder, the sound is going to stay in the same place. When you play a trumpet, the sound is going to stay in the place. It is not going to move out of there. And that's a kind of an interesting thing. If I would tap my mouthpiece, do you hear, is there a sound coming from that? There is. Is it a pitch? It is, isn't it? And it goes down as the length of the tube. Now, does any one of you know what happens on the inside of the instrument when that happens, or happens in your mouth when this happens? Do you sing? No takers? Okay. All right, we have what are called nodal points. And these nodal points are, if you don't mind my sitting down, I had a good-looking lady who ran into me here a couple years ago and broke both my legs. So so when we tap the mouthpiece like that, what we do is we have air molecules. There's air molecules in the room and in the instrument too, and these air molecules are jammed tightly together. And in the end of the bell, they are jammed tightly together. And because of that molecular action of the molecules banging back and forth this way, it sets up what is known as a standing wave. Now, a standing wave indicates to you that this wave is in motion, but it is not going anywhere. It's standing right where it is. So the molecules are banging back and forth like this, and we have a wave that moves from the front of the horn, and if you had a rope and you tied it to that wall over there and tied to this stand, and if you flip the rope this way, you could see the rope in motion, going that way and coming back. The wave that starts at that end will come from the bell to the mouthpiece, and from this one from the mouthpiece to the bell, and that is known as a standing wave. Now, the sound that's on the inside of this trumpet cannot be blown out of there. You cannot move the sound out of the trumpet, because sound does not travel that way. If, for example, you had a big log and you dropped that log in a pond of water, the log would push the water down, and as it comes back from the energy of the log going down, what happens is there's a ring formed. As the log goes down again, there is another ring formed. The first ring is the first ring and remains there. The second ring is the new one. If there's enough energy afflicted by that, it goes down again, and there will be another ring, indicating that the water underneath that log is the same water that was there in the first place. All you people live close to the ocean, and if you see a big log out in the ocean, and all of a sudden a wave comes along, what happens to the log? It moves where? It does come to the shore? It does. If it hits if the wave connects it right, you're right. But if it just happens to bring this log up, then the log will go back down in the same place that it was and stays out there, right? Indicating to you that the water that's out there is the same water that was there when it brought the log up and down. Now, the wave is new water or new energy all the time, but the water is the same water. There's a certain amount of motion from the wave coming to the shore, and it goes back and forth. But that wave does not travel to Hawaii and back, or to any place else. It stays right there, and that's what we're talking about with this business of sound. That sound stays within the instrument and does not move anywhere. Now, we kind of want to know how sound really does travel, and how many of you heard that sound travels in waves? Everybody's heard that. So you think of this wave going this way and continuing, but that's not the way it works. It works as in standing waves. How many of you been in a toy store at Christmas time and seen 5 steel balls on strings? Have you seen that? And you pull one steel ball out and it hits these other 4 steel balls, and what happens? How many on the other end? 1. That's right. You pull 2 steel balls out, and what happens on the other side? 2 go out. Pull 3 steel balls out, 3 go out. That's right. What kind of energy is passing through the steel balls? What kind? Kinetic, did you say? Kinetic energy, that's right. Now, in this room, now, we can imagine, it's kind of hard to explain the physics of this thing because you get into so many complications about the physics of sound that I would like to put it in just this way so that you can understand what we're talking about. We could probably be here for 2 weeks if we get into the physics of this thing, but that's not really important to you anyway. But if you understand how this sound travels, then we'll know how that goes. So imagine now that we have all these steel balls in this room instead of air molecules, right? Okay? So I trigger off one steel ball from my sound of voice, right? And kinetically, this energy travels to your eardrums, right? And your eardrums bang back and forth like this because there are no more steel balls in your head, right? So you can hear what I'm saying, but the sound that is originated is in my mouth, and it does not travel any other way than kinetic energy. Does everyone follow that? So the trick of the thing is, if you can't blow a note out of a trumpet, you know, and we know that you can't do that, we can energize the molecular action within the trumpet, and depending on how relaxed we are is going to depend on how far that sound will travel, or the amount of energy that we have in there. All right? Does everyone understand that? So we're that far along. Now these concepts are kind of crazy sometimes, and what you want to do is, I don't want you to believe everything that I'm going to tell you. What I want you to do is I want you to look it up and find out what it is, because knowledge is your only weapon. It is your only weapon. What you know is your only weapon. And you always must remember, don't ever have to put somebody else's light out to make your own shine. Okay? We have to be socially acceptable, politically acceptable, and then you have to sing like a sucker or play the trumpet or whatever you're doing. Now, have any of you in the room studied Gestalt theory of psychology? All right, can you tell me a little bit about Gestalt? Well, the Gestalt was formed by a group of men over in Hungary and Germany and places like that, and they all got together to corral what they thought could be a help or a means for people to, would you say, get their act together. So they came up with the idea that our senses were the most important things that dictated to us what we do. All right? We have 5 senses now. Can you tell me what they are? Anytime we lose concentration on any one of our sensory activities, we will distort the thing that we want to do. And for example, if we are hearing like we want to hear, and all of a sudden our attention has gone to seeing, which is one of our sensory activities, the first thing we know that the seeing will knock out the hearing. Okay? I have many, many students who have come by and told me some crazy things, you know, about trumpet playing and hearing and this and the like of that. And there was several vocal teachers at Indiana University who used to send their students up to receive information on the breath and this and that and the other thing. And maybe you would recognize some of their names. Eileen Farrell was one of them. She sang with the Bach Aria crew, and she was married to a policeman out of New York, and she was quite a gal, all right. All right, but anyway, we have to recognize that music is an oral art, and any time we lose control of the sound in our minds, we're out of it. Here a few years ago, there was a fellow that went to down in California, was playing with a road crew, and he heard Jerry Hay play. I suppose all you people know who Jerry Hay is, and he asked Jerry to give him a lesson or two, and of course Jerry was very busy with Quincy Jones and Michael Jackson and a whole bunch of other people, didn't have time. And he said, well, where did you study? And he said, well, I studied with that farmer out there in Indiana, you know. And so sure enough, he was traveling up to San Francisco, and one of my students was playing with the San Francisco Opera Company. His name was Jimmy Miller. And he heard him play, and he wanted to find out what was cooking. So, and by the time he got to into Canada, Ralph Crivero, who was playing the Christmas Oratorio, the Piccolini part, you know, and he wanted to spend some time with that. And so I got a telephone call from him, and he said, I've heard 3 of your guys play, and he said, I'm really in trouble. I've been told I'm losing my embouchure. So this guy flies in from Canada. I said, you're wasting your money. I mean, you're going to fly that long to study for an hour? And he said, yeah, I've got to see you. So he came in, and he said, I've taken some lessons, and I have been told that I'm losing my embouchure. So I said, well, I think what we better do is we better find a mirror and see if we can find it. So we went over there, and we looked in the mirror, and I said, gee whiz, there it is. You haven't lost it, and there's mine. I think what our problem is that we've got our head in the wrong place. So we started out with some exercises of hearing this sound, and within an hour and a half, and he said, I haven't played that well in 6 years. And the only thing that we believe about that is that we have to make sure, since music is an oral art, that we never lose the business of sound in our mind. We know now that sound travels by waves, and it's just like a bunch of steel balls. It's kinetic energy. You push the light button over there, and the lights go on, and the energy's there, but the switch is still there, and the lights are still there, but the moving of energy is there, and we now have lights. So what we want to do now, we want to get into another aspect of this performance business. Does everyone understand what isometric action is? Could you tell me what an isometric action is? All right, that's right. You can push like this, and you're not going anywhere, but your muscles are getting bigger, right? Okay? So that is known as isometric action. Now we have another thing that complicates trumpet playing or singing or any form of instrumental work, and that is modified isometric action. Now, modified isometric action is where you mentally dictate to yourself that I'm going to now push on this hand, and I'm going to move this over here. But there still is that tremendous amount of energy placed. We can call it wasted energy if you want to call it that. Or you can say that you wear yourself out quicker that way, or whatever you want to do it. So we have another few little exercises we have to ask you to do, and to find out to which one is the easiest one to do. Now I'd like to have you all take your fingers and point them around the room. Well, you're a little slow on that, George. Let's, okay. Now, may I ask you, good looking, what are you doing? You're what? Well, tell me. She's timid. What are you doing? You're pointing the fingers around the room. How many of you are aware that your wrists are moving, your arms are moving, your head's moving, your whole body's in action, mostly, right? Those actions are kinesthetic responses to a thought of pointing your fingers around a room. And then you say, well, what in the world does that have to do with singing or trumpet playing? Well, it has a lot to do with it. All right, now we're going to ask you to do one other thing. I'm going to, let's see, I'll point my, your name is George? Okay, I'm going to point my fingers at you like this, and I'd like to have everybody point their fingers at me. And I want you to gradually bring your fingers together like that, as slowly as you possibly can. Do you feel the tension in your hands and in your arms and in your shoulders? And if you do it slow enough, will you feel the tension across your back? You sure do, don't you? Now that's one way of getting those fingers together. And we'll show you how that works within the trumpet here in just a minute. All right? There is another way to get those fingers to come together. And what I want you to do is I want you to, again, point your fingers at me and open them up like this and get mentally good and relaxed and repeat after me everything I say. Okay, sweetheart? You got them? There you go. All right. Let's go. And you don't look at your fingers now, and you say, my fingers are coming together. Say it. My fingers are coming together. 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 What happened to your fingers? They came together. All right? Now, may I ask you this, which is the easiest way to do that? What, is that way the easiest way to do? Okay. So that brings up a point, is that we have two ways to go. We can either tell ourselves that we are going to get our minds in how we take a breath and what we do with every muscular activity in our body to produce a sound, vocally, instrumentally, or any other way. And this business of keeping Gestalt, when we talk about Gestalt, we're talking about everything in one pattern, and all the things that come around that have to be zeroed into that goal orientation. Now, good looking, I'm going to have you do something for me, will you? Now, I want you to look at this picture, and this will have to do with seeing. Would you tell me what that... Would you like to borrow my glasses?
No. One of 6 lenses.
Okay. Would you tell me what that is? Turn it any way you want to turn it. It's a bird. It's a plane. It's a, well...
It's a bird.
Is that right?
That's what
Turn it the other way and see if you can find it. Is it a different bird now?
Now this one.
It's all right. Now, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to start with this young lady. Would you come up here? Would you stay here a minute? All right. Will you come up and tell me what is in that picture? What's that? You think so? Okay. You're George? We'll use three of these people here to tell me what's in this thing. And this has to do with our seeing and how it operates as our perspective of where we keep our minds. You don't see anything. If I told you that was a cow, a farm animal that goes, "Moo," would you believe that? You believe that? Would you believe that? I'm going to show you that cow now. And you won't be able to see anything but that. Okay? Here's a fence. All right? There's a black nostril. Go up his forehead. There's a black eye. You see that? You see that cow?
That's
Is that
very clearly.
Do you see that cow?
That's great.
Do-
That's definitely.
It's definitely a cow. Was anyone else like to have a look at the cow? All right, come on down. Come on down. And you say, what is the world? Have a good look at it now.
Right there. Ears, eyes, mouth. Fence back there, the streets. Cow? I still don't see it. There's eyes, there's a nose, there's his ears, he's looking right at you, and his body's out there.
Okay. Is that really what it is, or is it just all suggestion?
No, that's all right. Look at it. All right. Can you see that guy?
No,
You can't see that?
no.
Okay. And of course, we have to bring our attention to sound that we are playing on the trumpet, or that we are singing, or we're playing on the violin, or whatever the instrument is. And we have to be so under control that we know from what we hear and what we see, and we'll show you how this works as far as reading music.
No,
Now there's a fence,
Yeah.
there's his nose, go up his hair, see his black hair?
yeah. Now I see it.
Okay. So then we say that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink unless you salt the sucker, right? So you've got to, you as teachers, you have to really salt that guy down. And no kidding. And I'm going to tell you something about how I feel about textbooks and stuff sometimes. When I started to teach at Indiana University, one of the things they wanted me to do was write a book on how to play the trumpet. And so we got into some pretty stiff arguments. And I said, there is absolutely no way that you can write a book on how to play the trumpet. There is no way that you can write a book on how to sing. There's no way you can write a book to dictate physical activity to play any instrument. It's impossible. And I would like to have all you people in a bit look up the acoustics of music, and then there are some other things we're going to get into this morning. And Dean Bain, at that time, he said, well, Adam, he said, you know, I think this is one of those things that I think every faculty member should do. And I said, well, I had been criticized for teaching students too long or too many hours, and my my teaching load after a couple of years got to about 36 or to 40 private trumpet students, and I had brass ensembles, and I performed over the state and did things like that. And so at that particular time, I had an offer on my desk that said I could go to New York University at considerable more money I was making. So I put the offer on Dean Bain's desk, and I said, well, you have a choice. I'm either going to stay and not write any books, or I'm gonna go. Well, they decided that that was possible for me to stay, so I never did write any books. Now and why I want to tell you that is that the business of acoustics is amazing, and what our minds will do for us is also amazing. Now, in 1975, we had a International Trumpet Guild was formed, and I was very, very hesitant to do what they asked me to do. They said, well, what we want you to do is we want you to perform, and I said, that end of it is fine. But also, what we want you to do is we want you to talk about the way in which you teach the trumpet. And I said, well, there are so many people who disagree with what I'm saying, and I want you people, if you feel like disagreeing, I want you to disagree. But look it up and find out if there's anything to it. And if there's something to do it, then you want to use it, right? Okay. So I gave this lecture, and I had a trumpet student who was playing with the Philadelphia Orchestra, and he called me up and he said, Bill, he said, there's a man here in town who has got one way of playing the trumpet, and I think that you're going to find that he's going to come up and talk to you. So I thought, well, hell, that's all right. So I spent 20 hours practicing this horn and getting this lecture ready to go. And I gave the lecture, and the man came up afterwards and he said, you know, he said, I can't believe a thing you said. I said, man, I think that's terrific. You're a free American. You can believe what you want to believe, but you might try it out. Now, if you try it out and it works, then use it. Now, if it doesn't work, send me a card, and I'll send you the 75 cents that it takes for you to get in here, and then we'll both be happy and everything will be fine. Well, 6 months later, this man showed up to the door, and he said, well, he said, I want to spend an afternoon with you. And I said, well, how come? He said, well, my kids have been playing better in 6 months than they have in a couple of years, so I figure I want to get in on some of this thing. And this was back in 1975. And I said, well, I don't think you could afford an afternoon. And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, the pros are paying me $50 an hour, and the students are paying me $25 an hour, so if you want to study the rest of the afternoon or 5 hours, that's going to cost you $250. Well, he wasn't so sure he wanted to do that, but he did want to go for an hour, okay? So today I charge the students $50 and the pros $80. So, and the only reason that I do that is Uncle Sam takes about everything I make. So, and it looks like they're going to get more too. So we started this out, and he said, would you do everything I ask you to do? And I said, well, I would be very, very happy to do anything you ask me to do, since you're paying me $50 an hour, and we'll see what we can do. And he said, this business about breathing, he said, that's an amazing thing. And he said, you demonstrated some things on this business of taking a breath. And I said, yeah, I did that. And he said, would you show me again? So I'm going to have all you people in here do this same crazy thing, if you will. All right? And he said, as I remember, the muscular activity happened to be where you placed your mind. And I said, I think that's right. So what we did is, I said, now what I want you to do is I want you to put your hands over your hair, if you've got any, you know, and all you're going to do now is you're going to take a breath. You don't pay any attention to anything but just breathing in slowly like you're yawning. And when you take the breath in, can you feel where the breath is physically? Okay. Now that's one way to think about it. And all you're doing is thinking about it. Now you can put your hands underneath your chin. And you can, we'll wait till good looking gets going there. All right. Now imagine your mouth is in between your chin and your hands. And take another breath. And you want to check to make sure, is there any difference there? If there is, that's fine and different. Do you know where your sternum bone is? You don't. How about you? Well, I'll tell you. Your sternum bone is this little area between your ribs right there, okay? Now you're going to take your fingers and you're going to imagine that your mouth is down there now, okay? Now breathe in now. Is there any difference in where your air feels like it is in your body? You feel that, right? Okay. Now you're going to all stand up and put your hand below your belly button if you can find it. Okay? All right. Now just slowly take another big breath. Is there a difference there? Okay. All right. Now you're going to move your hands up here and take a breath. Your mouth's in between your hair and your hands now. Take a breath and remember where it is. Put your hands below your belly button. And may I just ask you this? Which and where do you feel the least? Do you feel less tension in their whole body when your hands are below your belly button or when it's above your head? That's right. So now we know how to breathe. Somebody asked me, you can sit down if you like. Somebody asked me, how did you learn to breathe? Well, I said, you know, when that doctor slapped me on the butt, that was the day I took a big breath, and that's the way it works. Now, whether we are singing or whether we are playing the trumpet or no matter what we're doing, the breath and the ability to use the breath becomes about by actually producing the product. The sound will dictate to you what kind of energy you have to produce that sound. And any time you reverse the order and you make a cause out of a result, you're in trouble. Does everyone follow that? Yes. Yes. Okay. Just the cause and results? Okay. Anytime you make a cause a result, in other words, anytime you think that you have to do something physically to get the sound and it becomes paramount or first in your mind, then you are distorting the muscular activity and the sensory activity that it takes to produce that sound. And all of a sudden, you inhibit yourself as to the amount of growth that can come from a physical... Yes? Absolutely. And let's all try this now. You know, you've heard that your tongue is supposed to go in certain places for this and that and the other thing, double tongue and triple tongue and all that sort of stuff. Can every one of you do this? My God, you're good at that. All right. Now, you can take the breath now and go. You can do that. Now, without moving your air or anything, I would like to have you wiggle your tongue that fast. It's impossible, isn't it? Okay. So if you're going to flutter tongue on a trumpet, you certainly don't make this go up and down to get brrr. You think brrr, right? And that becomes the sound of brrr, or thinking that makes your tongue do what it's supposed to do. Well, generally speaking, we say, I'm one of those people that believes that you take a big breath, but you go, that's, what the breath has to be to play. But if I think of how I have to blow, then my mind is stuck in that, and it's not in the sound that comes out of the instrument or the sound that comes from a voice. Relax my hand, relax my arm. You're going to go like this. Put those arms over my elbow. Okay? You got it in a place where you're going to get plenty of steam. Mm-hmm. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to focus the attention on energy and not on this arm. So if you'll give me about just a second or two, and when I tell you to start gradually pulling down, you'll gradually pull down. But if you bang down on me, I'm going to lose the concentration and things won't happen for me. Then I'll be embarrassed. And we won't okay. Okay. Would you gradually pull down? It's a beautiful day, isn't it, sweetheart? Beautiful day? How about that?
Yeah.
Kind of difficult, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right. So, and of course, what we're trying to say is if we get all tightened up, boy, we're going to blow the note out of that horn. We defeat what we're after. Can you see how that works? Mm-hmm. And you've got a big hand and you're pretty stout. All right. Now I want you to just give me everything you've got. Now what are you doing here? How are we doing there? So the thing that happens here, he's getting all tightened up like that. And this happens with breathing, no matter whether we're playing the trumpet, trombone, or whatever it is. And that's about a third of what I've got. Okay? Now, what you tell yourself is that your thumb and your fingers are coming together, right? Now, with what Gabriel here was doing, he was isometrically pulling these hands together, right? So what happens, they come to a stopping point, and he can no longer squeeze any more than he has got. His shoulders tight, his arms are up there, and you can see, you okay? All right? Now, if you go through the attitude that we did this thing, then your hand can come completely together, and you can have tremendous strength like that, because you are not holding back your fingers. When you take a big breath and the energy is in the sound, then your breathing capacity has the whole bit to do with using the energy for sound. And a fella came up here with a red shirt on and telling me about taking a breath and getting all and can't get some notes out, huh? Mm-hmm. Well, the only thing that stops those are the guys in the way that's what you think. Thank you, Gabriel. Okay? And the only reason we talk about that is to make sure that we take advantage of everything that we have. So this next thing has to do with the energy in which we play and the like of that. So we got back to this fellow that decided he wanted to take some lessons and stuff. So he said to me, he said, you made the statement that you never buzz your lips when you play the trumpet. And he said, how in the world is that possible? He said, we have to have some vibration going here someplace to get that thing going. And he said, you never buzz the mouthpiece. And I said, you bet I don't. And I said, but however, that doesn't mean that I can't. All right? So he said, well, I would like to have you buzz that mouthpiece. So I took the mouthpiece and he said, now that's the way you play a note on the trumpet, isn't it? And I said, no, that's not the way I play a note on the trumpet. If, for example, I was going to be a mouthpiece buzzer, boy, I'd practice the hell out of this thing. I mean, you know, but that's not what I do. He said, well, I would like to have you play the best note on the mouthpiece or the way you play the trumpet. And I said, I'd be very happy to. He said, all I can hear is air going through there. I said, that's the way I play the trumpet. He said, that's unbelievable. He said, well, something's going to have to happen here. I'll see if I can find a pipe. And this is a Venturi tube. It's the lead pipe that's on a trumpet. There's a mouthpiece receiver here, and there's a tuning slide receiver over here. And if you put the mouthpiece in this thing like that, and you blow through the mouthpiece, then let's see what happens. He said, you mean to tell me you're not buzzing your lips? And I said, that's absolutely right. I'm not buzzing my lips. Okay. He said, well, can you have any further proof of that? And I said, yeah, I can take this mouthpiece and blow the air through it, and if I'm fortunate enough to hit the hole in this thing, well, let's see what happens. So we put that up there, and then we go. And he said, you mean to tell me your lips are not vibrating? And I said, I didn't say that. Okay? So what happens now is we have molecules in the mouthpiece are banged tightly together. The molecules in the end of the tube are banged tightly together. We set up a standing wave, and the air molecules in between that thing are banging back like this. And our lips now vibrate sympathetically with what's in that tube. And he said, boy, he said, that's just about as unbelievable as anything I ever heard. He said, you've got to, and lots of people will say you buzz here, and that goes out like that. Okay? Well, I said, there's one other way we can do it. There were a couple honorary 4 guys in Los Angeles when I had a little trouble here after a lady ran into me and broke both my legs, and so they sent me the perfect mute. This is the perfect mute. Now let me show you how you use this mute. Before you go to the job, you use the mute. Anytime in the music that it says tacit, you use the mute. In between tunes, you use the mute. After the job, you use it. And before you go to bed, if you really want to take advantage of it, you use it then. And what you do is you pull out the cork and fill it full of vodka, and you're in good business, okay? All right, okay. But they had to have a reason here to bring the mute, and so anyway, so what I did was we got talking about this, and I said, well, why don't we do this? How many of you played in a jug band? Nobody's played in a jug band? Maybe, I guess I was born when the stills were in the backyard and all that sort of stuff. But anyway, you blow across the tube, the opening here, and let's see what happens. So you blow across there, and what happens? Do you get a sound? Am I buzzing my lips? No, you're not buzzing your lips. But we are activating the air molecules in this perfect mute, and so we get this sound, and then you can faintly feel that your lips are vibrating because what happens within this mute. What we do is these lips vibrate sympathetically now. You're a trumpet player, right? Come on down here and blow this thing for me, will you? What's that? You're just going across it and see if you can faintly feel your chops. Feeling just a very little bit? It's kind of hard, isn't it? Well, you do it several times till you find out. And you ask yourself, if they're not vibrating, well, how do your lips feel now? You don't. Okay, now put them up. Do they feel different when you do that? He's not.
I don't notice anything. I'm just blowing this thing.
That's what a trumpet's all about. But anybody else can try it if you like. But those lips vibrate sympathetically with what's happening on the inside of this mute. And you're saying what kind of an instrument you play? Could it be anything else? What kind of an instrument?
A brass instrument?
Could it be anything else?
A breath instrument?
A wind instrument. That's right. It is a wind instrument. Okay? We talked about a man by the name of Galadora, a saxophone player. And this man was quite a classical, you can sit down if you like. This man was quite a classical saxophone player. And we were talking in New York about some things, and we got talking about this, and I said, you know, I've been studying acoustics and going to the physics department and all this and stuff, and I have some questions to ask you. Do you make the reed of the saxophone vibrate to get the sound that you want? And he said, absolutely not. He said, we put the reed on the mouthpiece and the lay is open. I blow through the mouthpiece and the lay, and it sets up the molecular action in the saxophone, and all of a sudden the reed vibrates because what the molecular action is doing. This happens no matter whether it's leaves in a tree or wherever it is, sound travels like that. Now, a few years ago, we had a Kahn instrument manufacturing company in Elkhart, Indiana. And one of my friends who had gotten a job up there of testing instruments and stuff decided that he was going to go around the state and places and give this address on how you blow notes out of an instrument. So I said, boy, he said, could we come down to Indiana University? And at that time there was a fellow that now played tuba in some professional groups, and he teaches at Bowling Green, Ohio, the University of Ohio in Bowling Green, Ohio. And so this man came to town and he said, I would like to set up an evening, Bill, and have all the trumpet, trombones, and tubas come in. And he started to explain how you blow the notes out of a horn. So this got to going and really interesting, and I said, well, what I would like to do is I would like to have, if it's all right with you, I'd like to have the physics department come down tomorrow morning, and let's just find out what this is all about. So the next morning, the physics guys from the physics department came down, and we started this thing, and Ivan Hammond was there with his B-flat tuba, and I said, what I'd like to have you do is measure the length of the instrument from the bell up to the mouthpiece without any valves, okay? So they measured the length of the instrument, and then they had a little tube about a 1/4 inch around, and I said, Ivan, I'd like to have you play low B flat on the tuba. And so they had an instrument they could measure the air pressure with, and so when they measured the air pressure, I said, at that air pressure and the speed of air, how long would it take for a note to come out of an instrument like that? They said it would take 6 seconds at the speed of air to go from the mouthpiece to the bell. All right? Now I said, now a trombone player, the distance of a trombone player, the length of the tube, is half the distance of a tuba. Now if he is blowing at the same rate, he has to blow 3 seconds, right? Now a trumpet is 1/2 half the distance of a trombone, so he has to blow 1.5 seconds to get to the end of the bell. Now if we're playing a march, bum, bum, ta-dum, bum, at 120, now the tuba player has to step 12 feet down the street to get the note out. The trombone player steps 6 feet to get a note out, and a trumpet player has to go 3 steps. Now, what kind of mentality are you going to have with those guys to coordinate that band? Okay? So, if you were going to blow a note out of a horn to get it to come out instantaneously or pretty instantaneously, you would have to be blowing 750 miles an hour or 111 feet per second. Okay, that's the way sound travels. Now, isn't that something? So, when we sing now, or whenever we do, the sound travels in the same way. So I pick up this tube here again, and we blow through the tube, and that's traveling at 1,100 feet per second, depending on the heat of the day. Okay? And anytime we distort the breath by trying to support the tone or by trying to do any of those crazy means, now that doesn't mean that there is not plenty of support for a sound. Does everyone understand that? But the support is a result of the sound that we are after. So when we sing a note now, how many of you have you read the autobiography of Enrico Caruso? Does everybody know who Enrico Caruso was? He was a great tenor, by the way. And this man went to a doctor when he was a younger person, and the doctor said, "You will never be able to sing. You will never be able to sing." And he said, "Well, why?" He said, "Because you don't have the throat of a singer or the vocal cords of a singer." And at the end of the book, it says, you do not have to have the throat or the vocal cords of a singer. What you have to have is the mind of a singer. Okay? One time we had a great situation going at Indiana University, and there were a lot of guys back there, Charlie Davis and Walt Blanton and Rick and all those guys, and we had a man by the name of William Bell, and he was quite a tuba player. And he would say, you don't have to have the body bigness of a tuba player, like he was huge, but you do have to have the mind of a tuba player, indicating to us that we have to have the mind of whatever we're going to be. Now, if we're going to be singers, if we're going to sing for a living, then, or play a violin or play drums or no matter what it is, we have to make one thing very important, and that one thing is music. I'm going to bring a couple people in mind here to tell you about them, and I don't want you to hold anything against me for what I'm going to say, and maybe this is the truth, or maybe it's not the truth, I'm not sure, but we'll start with a lady by the name of Judy Garland. Everyone know who she is? When she was a youngster, boy, could she sing. My gosh. And as time went by, she made so much money, and she became important. And egos got involved, okay? And all of a sudden, she has to call for help. Booze, drugs, and men. And the thing she was searching for, she had when she was a child, was music. There was a trumpet player here years ago that played with Stan Kenton and was one wonderful trumpet player. Listen to the recordings of this man, Maynard Ferguson, when he was a younger man, when he played Halls of Brass and House of Glass and all these different things, when he had that beautiful, beautiful low register and all the high register and was just beautiful. And when I first met Maynard Ferguson, the only thing that he was interested in was playing beautiful music. And after a while, he got so important that he could play all these high notes and all that sort of stuff. And the last time I heard Maynard play the trumpet, I got all this all over the high register, and the thing that he had lost was the beautiful presentation of music. It is music that is important and not ourselves. Everyone remembers J.S. Bach, right? How many teeth did he have in front? Do you know? You don't know. Did he have a beard or a mustache? You know? What do you remember about him? You remember his music. So what we're after is we're after music. Now we have some things that we really have to do. And those things are things to construct a self-image of ourselves, that we know who we are, and we know that nothing within our systems will ever change our end goal of being what we want to be as musicians. Now I have a little book here. Well, I had one. Here it is. And this is a little bit of a down on the farm philosophy sort of thing. And it's called Psycho-Cybernetics. All right? And in the book, you can run into this little part here that talks about self-image. And it tells you how to practice this self-image. And what I'd like to have you all do, if you have the time, is to buy this. I don't know what it sells for today. It was 95 cents a few years ago. But anyway, it's called A New Way of Getting More Living Out of Life. Okay? What's that? Maxwell Maltz. He's written many books since that time, but what we're going to do is we're going to construct a self-image through our imagination. I happen to have a grandson that I don't know how he wound up with the brains he did, but he was in I think probably the 5% of the United States, and he was selected by a group of people to go down to space camp down at what is it, Alabama or someplace, yeah, right down there. And so he'd been studying trumpet for a while, and he wanted to play in the jazz bands in school and do all this and that and the other sort of thing. But he had a big lot of trouble with himself, and the trouble was that he didn't know how to work. He'd go to school, and he was a straight A student. He didn't have to study. All this stuff sort of came. So he finally went to this space camp when he was in junior high school, and he came back and he said, well, he said, Grandpa Dewey, he said, I want to tell you something. What we learned down at the space camp was just exactly what you're talking about playing the trumpet. And he said, what happened was when I first walked into that class, they handed me these cards. Would you like to read that card so everybody can hear what that is?
Obstacles are what you see when you take your eyes off the goal.
Obstacles are what you see when you take your eyes off the goal. Anytime you lose the sound in your mind, you're going to run into obstacles. And those obstacles will be insurmountable until you get your head back where it's supposed to be. Okay? Now, you know there's an awful lot of religious things going on today, and I had a guy, I think is Carl Severs up there? Yeah. Well, Carl Severs played first trumpet with the PTL Club. Does everybody know who the PTL Club was? Okay. Well, anyway, Carl is a wonderful trumpet player, and he got connected with what some phony religion can do for you. Now, what I want to tell you is I would like to repeat the Lord's Prayer to you like my father told it to me. Now, you can take it out of the context of religion, or you can put it into the religion if you believe that way. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. What does that mean to you? What does hallowed mean? Holy, very respectfully, right? Okay. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. What does that mean to you, Jack? You're not Jack, I can see that. Okay, we're going to talk about that will thing here in a minute, but we're going to go ahead just a little bit so we have a better understanding of what it is, okay? Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. Give us this day our daily bread. Now, what do you suppose my dad told me about that? You can take a day off, buddy, but you can't put it back. So you better get off and on. You better get going, huh? Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Now, what does that mean? What does that mean to you? You never take a crack at another human being, because if you do, and if you criticize that person, you are taking something out of your life. So you're going to be strong for yourself. The self-image is going to be strong. Lead us not to temptation, but deliver us from evil. How about you? What does that mean? Lead us. What's the big sin in the world? Oh, let's name. Well, there could. What is the big sin in the world, huh? Feeling sorry for yourself is the big sin in the world. It causes hate, it causes greed, violence. It causes about everything that you've got. So you don't feel sorry for yourself, okay? That's a big trick, buddy. If you don't think that isn't a big trick, wait till you live a day or two, okay? For thine is the kingdom, thine is the power, and thine is the glory. And what is thine? What? Yours what? Your mind is where you exist. Your mind is your strength, pardon me, and your mind is your glory or your happiness, okay? And then we go back to that will thing, and we know what is right, we know what is wrong, in the way of, and in this business, people, we have to be socially acceptable. We have to be politically acceptable. And then you either have to play the hell out of the trumpet or sing the hell out of what you're doing or whatever it is. But those things come, and they come in that order. I had a guy try out for the Dallas Symphony Orchestra here quite a few years ago, and there were 250 trumpet players applied out for the job. And you knew immediately that the guy was lucky, because there was plenty of people out of those 200 people that could fill that job. But the people that were judging him, they say, oh, that guy doesn't look like my father-in-law, okay? Or any of these things. So what we have to do is we have to be politically acceptable, and we have to be socially acceptable, and then we have to be very artistic in what we're doing. There's another facet that we want to dwell on a little bit this morning, and in the U.S. News World Report in August 3rd of this year, we're talking about, there's an article in about getting into the zone. Does everybody understand what we mean when we talk about getting into a zone? Getting into a mental frame of mind that will permit us to do what we have to do to keep our minds in the sound and make sure that we have no clues of fear or any of those things. We're not too concerned about what somebody says about us. We recognize it, but we have to follow our drummer. We have to be who we are, and you have to stay with that. You never lose that. That has to be there all of the time. And if you read the article, you'll find out that they put little probes here in different places on your head to find out what your brain is doing. It's great to know that, but that won't help you know what's happening. So that end result has to happen, and it has to happen immediately. And that's where you're only going to be as fine a trumpet player or as a fine a vocalist or fiddler or whatever you are going to hope to be, is going to be because of what you hear. So if you're going to be a singer, listen to all the great singers. There are a lot of them. I did a thing with Lawrence Melchior and Helen Trouble one time, and it was an amazing thing. We were playing in the Denver Symphony Orchestra, and they were doing the Love and Death music from Tristan and Isolde. So this gracious lady, and boy could she sing. So we got the Roland brothers and myself and a few of the other people in the orchestra. After the rehearsal, I said, you know what I'd like to do? I would just like to hear what that lady's got. She's got this beautiful, beautiful sound, and I would like to know what could happen. So there's a section in the orchestra where the brass start to swell, you know. And so I said, I'll tell you what we do when we get there. I'm going to start blowing. Let's just see what happens. And so we start this thing, and sound starts to expand, you know, and she's standing there. She takes one step forward, and you would think she was pinching her fanny together, but my God, the sound that came out of that woman was unbelievable. And after it was over with, why, I was standing there, and she said to Truman, she said, I've got to meet that trumpet player. And I thought, holy mackerel, what's going to happen now? So she came back and she said, why don't more brass players blow like that? That gives me the support that I need. It's amazing, isn't it? And another thing happened from that same gal. They were doing a thing in Kansas City, and the orchestra from Indiana University was there, and they were playing Parsifal. And so I had graduated from Eastman School of Music. I have 2 master's degrees, one in theory and one in composition. And I lack only a few hours of having a degree in psychology and about 10 hours having a degree in English literature. So I'm in the hall here, and Howard Hansen and Dean Bain and Hans Busch from the Metropolitan, all people, were standing in around, you know, and I'm over here talking to Herb Mueller. And Walt Blanton knows who Herb Mueller was. I guess you do too, don't you, Charlie? Okay. So we're in there, and who walks through the door but Helen Tromble? Okay. So I thought, my gosh, boy, she'll never remember me, you know. She walked past everybody, came over here and gave me a kiss, and she said, let's go to breakfast. And the guys, Howard Hansen said, where in the world did you connected with her? I said, I've only seen her once in my life. But people remember that, and the thing that you remember is the music. And whenever you get to a concert and all of a sudden the emotional feeling of the music can do things to your physical system, send chills up and down your back, and all of a sudden everything is beautiful. And that's what we're after. And that only comes from your mind, the way in which you hear. You are only going to be as fine a musician as you hear, and you're going to listen to great performers. Listen to Enrico Caruso, listen to Mary Alonso, listen to Helen Tromble, listen to anyone that you can listen. And they all have one thing in common. The basic production is generally the same, but the sound is different, and thank God everybody sounds different, because it makes it possible for every one of you people in here to do what you want to do. If you go to a concert and hear Doc Severinsen play the trumpet, and if everybody sounded like Doc Severinsen, you could go to that concert and you'd heard the whole business. Adolf Hirst sounds different. Maurice Andre sounds different. And all these people sound different. And their instruments become an extension of them. So we have to make sure that we are going to listen and we're going to hear what comes out of our minds and what happens that way. And that's about all I have to say about the music business. And if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, I would, if I can answer them, I'd be very happy to. Yes.
Bill, I have a question. I studied with Melchior.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, and I studied with Walter McClue, with Toscanini's assistant for years.
Sure.
He made a comment that vocally different than instrumentally. He said you cannot produce what you cannot hear.
That is right.
All right? And that, with my students, I felt that, and I love the comment, garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
Because I'm convinced, and we have serious music students at the community college level, we have those who would like to be serious, but don't know how to be. And you get through a process with them that what you said today is so marvelous in my mind, because these young people don't understand that their ears are being, from high school on, and even beyond that, if you look at our recording industry, they are not hearing that which they wish to produce, ultimately.
That
And
can
I'm
be.
afraid, you know, I use the example of sound like a train whistle or sound like a Phanorton.
Uh-huh.
Now, I don't know what a Phanorton is either, but if they don't, they can't produce it. And the moment I tell them what a Phanorton sounds like, they can produce it.
Isn't that amazing, though?
And that's the process where the mind says, you are, in our society, structurally, you talk about society and all, everything you say feels like the Bible as far as where I live in my heart. But I hear this in that they are taught that musicians cannot make a living. Their parents teach that.
Well, my father was a professional violin player, and he came from living in Pennsylvania, and he had asthma and came to Denver, and the only music they had at that time was hold down music and stuff like that. So he wasn't too interested in that sort of thing, and he had asthma so bad that that when he got feeling better in the high country of Colorado, he thought, well, I'll go back to Pennsylvania and start playing again. He got off the train and had an attack of asthma and darn near died, and he came back to Denver. And of course, at that time, there was practically nothing in Denver to do, but he did have a Guarnerius violin that he did to give to my sister, and she later became one of the fiddle players in the San Francisco Orchestra. And so my mother was the first music supervisor in Atlantic City, Missouri. So we had our evenings were playing the instrument and my mom playing the piano and we all singing, and all the neighbors would come in. We had a wonderful time. And when I first started to play the trumpet, I studied with a man by the name of Ben Foltz, who was the third cornet player in John Philip Sousa's band. And so I didn't have enough money to buy the books and stuff like that, so he said, well, if you'll help me, you know, clean up this and that and the other, I'll give you a lesson. So the first lesson he gave me was, I'm going to play this note, and I want you to play that note, Bill. So I immediately learned to play from my ears, and I didn't realize what a blessing that was, because today the kids go into the band room and there'll be, say, the second staff, that note is G, and they put a circle down under that. You don't play any fingers. You F sharp, you put the second valve down, and they learn to play with what they're seeing and not with what they're hearing. I had learned all kinds of tunes, Happy Birthday and Jingle Bells and all this stuff, before I even knew what a note looked like. And that has put me instead all these years, and that's the way I have based my teaching. And when I teach, if I hear a student play a certain kind of sound, I will change my sound and ask him to imitate that sound. And in the process of his imitating that sound, he will reduce some tension that somewhere he has in his system. And I have learned by listening or putting a finger in my ear, you know, like you can start talking. Do you hear yourself better when you plug your ears up? Just talk and say. Plug your ears up and start to say, hello, George. Okay. So people would say, what in the hell are you doing plugging up your ears? Don't you like to listen to me? Well, from that, I can tell what the basic format of overtones is. If their tone is too strident, there is not enough fundamental in that sound. And what they do is their tongues may become too tense. All this must become too tense. And the first thing you know, when you're all tensed up, what can you do? You can't do anything. You've got to be relaxed. And when we say relaxed, we're talking about being relaxed between your ears. I mean, you know, that's where you have to be mentally relaxed, so they hear that sound, and the sound comes out with great energy, but it comes out with that business of relaxed, and it's relaxed energy. It's not relaxed blah. It is never energy tension. It is not, I'm going to belt the hell out of that. It's breadth of sound. And that is what we're after. And the way we think is going to determine where our strength is. And the amount of sound that you play, in other words, when you take a big breath and you want to play a note of a trumpet or anything else, if you think I've got to put my tongue in a certain place or I've got to do this with that or the other, you imagine the sound that you want to play and you pronounce that sound. And all of a sudden, the sound jumps out of the instrument or it jumps out of the vocalist or any of those things. And you don't push that sound out of there. That sound is energy. And that, I don't know, I can't relate too much about the vocal thing, but I would say that if I were a singer, boy, I would take a great big relaxed breath, and I would imagine the most beautiful sound that I can imagine. And we have to divorce ourselves from any, in playing the trumpet, we have to divorce ourselves from any of this lateral tension that comes from your tongue or from any of this grunt muscle squeezing. So we sport the sound, and you float the sound, the sound that is in the instrument or in the vocal. I would say that sound would be floated with the breath. It is always in a state of flotation. It is never in a state of pushing or struggling. Now you can disagree with that if you like, and I'll back down, okay? But that's the way I played the trumpet. I will have played the trumpet 69 years. So that's the way that goes. And it's certainly been a pleasure to be here, and I want to thank all you guys that made it possible for me to come.